Find out if that common health claim is fact or fiction. I'm Dr. Mark Faries, a health psychologist and exercise physiologist, and we pit the mythical claims against the scientific evidence in Health Hullabaloo on Texas A&M Health Talk. Welcome to Health Hullabaloo. We are here to try to create some clarity in the confusion and commotion that we call this health and fitness myth world. My name is Dr. Mark Faries. I'm here with Tim Schnettler. We got a good question today, as we discussed, a very common question, this idea that we can turn fat into muscle, or vice versa, that I guess, right, if we could turn muscle into fat. I've heard this a ton, especially all of my years in the fitness industry, and that's why people come. It's like holidays came, or I took a break from exercising, and during that holiday or that break, I had all this muscle and it just turned into fat, and then I need to get back and exercise and start eating better so I can take all that fat and convert it back to muscle.
Right.
And we kind of talked last time about this idea of finny or skinny fat and how people use terms like soft or jiggly, and they just, I don't know why it is. Big bone. And why do we think that it why it was muscle that turned into fat? I don't really know that. But as we kind of dissect this out in particular, we'll find that first and foremost that a muscle cell or myocyte is a completely different type of cell with a completely different purpose than a fat cell or an adipocyte. So I think it's easy to consider it as apple and orange. They're just two different things. But what's interesting is a muscle can store fat in it as well, in the form of a triglyceride, so that we can break that down and the muscle can use that for energy. The liver can store fat as well. We have the risk for fatty liver disease because of that fact. And so you have a fat cell that's storing fat, and now you have a muscle cell, so maybe that's where some of the confusion came from. But if we look at the function of both, I think it'll kind of help clarify. So let's start with the muscle cell, or the myocyte. The main function, as we probably would think, is a bunch of muscle cells combined. We can then contract those and move our skeleton around. So that's the main purpose. It's packed in with muscle proteins. And if we go exercise or lift weights in particular, and we haven't in a while, we're going to create damage to that muscle cell. Those contractile proteins inside of there are going to break apart a little bit. We get sore, and that kind of tender, that inflammatory response after workout, when it's hard to sit on the toilet or whatever, that soreness is the recovery process occurring in that muscle because of that muscle damage from the workout. Now, it's not necessarily a scary thing, because we like the adaptations. Now, we play it safe, but if we do everything right, we're still going to probably be fatigued and sore.
Well, and you hear trainers all the time say that's a good thing. You know, that soreness after you work out, they say it's a good thing.
It is, and it's within reason. I mean, it gets so bad, and we've probably all been there to some point where I worked my back so hard I couldn't put my hands on the steering wheel or something like that. But within reason, you're right. And the reason they say it's good is because when we create that damage, the brain does not like that. The body does not like this damage. And so what it's going to try to do is repair itself to the point that if you do that same workout, lift that same weight, do everything the same, then you're not going to create as much damage. We like that because why? That repair process is going to make us stronger. So if I do bicep curls, for example, and I do 3 sets of maybe 10 repetitions with, 20 pounds. So I would do those 10 reps and those 3 sets, so 30 total repetitions. I might be sore tomorrow. Well, that damage created, I go and I fix that. The next time I try to do 20 pounds, 3 sets, 10 reps, I don't create as much damage because I've gotten stronger. And so when people want to get strength, that's an adaptation that comes from this damage. Well, one of the other adaptations that's important for us today in this question is the idea of the muscle cell getting bigger, and that's called hypertrophy. And the reason that is it's sort of like, and as I'm looking over here, I see a picture of Mario Brothers with the bricks that you said. All right, so when you smash those bricks with Mario, if anybody knows what that is on this podcast, the idea is that if those break down, we're going to have to repair that somehow. Well, that's how the muscle cells. You break them down, you're going to re-brick that house. You're going to re-brick that muscle. That's why a good nutrition, protein comes in. When we rebuild that muscle, so to speak, we pack in a little bit more protein in that muscle cell than we had previously. So that causes it to get a little bit bigger. If we're smart in the way that we work out, we can work out in a particular way that makes the muscle even bigger and faster. So that's why we have exercise prescriptions for strength. We have exercise prescriptions for endurance, for muscle hypertrophy. For example, a common recommendation is you pick a muscle. Let's use our bicep again as an example. You would do somewhere around 9 sets for that muscle in one workout. Mm-hmm. Somewhere maybe between 6 and 12 repetitions. So what does that look like? I go to the gym and I'm working biceps. I want to get them a little bit bigger. So I get barbell and I do 10 repetitions and I do 3 sets of that, okay? And then I go to the dumbbells and I do 3 sets of 10 of dumbbells.
Right.
So now I'm at 6 sets. So then I go find the machine, the bicep curl machine,
right.
do 3 sets of that in one workout. So in my hour or whatever it was, I did 9 total sets on my bicep. That's where, again, commonly you'll hear recommendations getting you into the muscle hypertrophy volume or range that is going to give us that effect. I know people who do upwards of 20 sets per muscle group per workout. Yikes. Now, these are the guys and gals that are in the bodybuilding business and are trying to create a lot of damage. Many of these folks are also taking extra stuff to help them recover faster and to get a little bit bigger, a little bit more so than what most people can. So this idea, though, is that you typically don't stumble upon these workouts that produce large amounts of muscle hypertrophy. And by the way, we'll probably talk about this later, but there should be no fear of getting big muscle because, again, you're not going to stumble upon this workout. Yeah. So the goal then is to get a very specific exercise and get the muscle to grow and get the muscle hypertrophy because we packed in that protein. All right, so that's muscle hypertrophy. It can happen, but this is how we need to work out. The opposite of that is if I sit around and I don't exercise as much as I did, there's really no reason for the body to keep that extra protein. And they say if you don't use it, you
lose it.
You lose it. And that's the way this is. You end up losing that. And if you've ever gotten a cast on like a broken arm or a knee surgery, or you've had to lay up in bed for a while, you notice that your muscles, they'll get smaller. And that's called atrophy. So we got hypertrophy is bigger muscle.
Atrophy.
Yeah, and they technically say it's the cross-sectional area. If that gets larger, that would be hypertrophy. And the cross-sectional area gets smaller, that would be atrophy. So that does happen. But you notice the muscle's not transitioning into anything at this point. It's largely just getting bigger or it's getting smaller depending on the stimulus that we put on. If we put the correct stimulus, we can maximize the hypertrophy. If we remove the stimulus for an extended period of time, then we will atrophy. Okay, so that's largely the muscle. The fat cell's goal is to store fat. And so we are designed as humans to store as much fat as possible. The thought is that in times where food was scarce, if we had to go live in the woods out here and we were trying to find food, the caloric intake would not be high. We largely don't find a lot of fat in nature. You know, if we did berries and plants, eat a lot of plants, maybe a little wheat, and if you could get an animal, it was probably a lean animal, not the ones we go buy at the store. And so the body's ability, when it did get fat, to store that away was awesome because it increased the probability of survival. And we had that energy. And it's hard to convince the body to give that up. You know what I mean? Because if I store, I want to keep it for when I really, really need it. So that's natural. That's why we crave high fat, high sugar foods as well. It's a natural. That's why we also want to be lazy, believe it or not, because our body wants to conserve that energy. You can watch any of the survival shows, whether they're clothed or naked. They have at some point in that show to balance conserving energy because they don't got a lot of food,
right,
with going out and building something or seeking something, or climbing this mountain. The brain has to figure that out because, again, we not only want to conserve energy, we crave it, and when we do get it, we store it. So over the years, I've heard people, they'll come up and say, Dr. Faries, I really want to lose weight, but man, I just crave food, like high-fat food, high-sugar food. And I'm like, join the club.
That's normal.
That's humans. That's all of us. We're designed that way. Or they say, I want to exercise more, but man, I'm just lazy. I just want to go home and relax. And when I got the choice to make, should I go to the gym and actually expend energy or stay at home and conserve it, I just decide. And again, I'm like, join the club. That's all of us. So we're not weird, so to speak, or we shouldn't feel weird or odd that's our struggle, because that's everybody. Now, clearly, another discussion for another time is not everybody succumbs to that, and how do we overcome that, which is an interesting discussion. And probably if I had figured out fully, I would be rich. But I don't. So we move back to converting fat into muscle cells. But this fat cell is interesting because it's so good at storing fat. It's designed for that, but it's also hesitant to give it up. So this is why a lot of times we work really, really, really hard, seemingly for a period of time, and we finally lose some body fat. And then it's like one weekend, we stray, or that 1 week, and then immediately it's right back because that fat cell didn't want to give it up. We finally enticed it to because we had to. And then eventually, when we did fall off the wagon, so to speak, it was very quick to accept that back.
And I think we've all been there, done that. We all know that it's a heck of a lot easier to put it on than it is to take it off.
There's no doubt. Yeah. And that's why we have a big push for prevention. Don't get there.
Right.
And how do we set up environments and social relationships and personal factors and determinants to let people kind of engage a lifestyle of self-control to where they maybe, don't ever get there and can fight that off starting at an early age, et cetera. So you have a fat cell that wants to store, is not willing to give it up. Another unique thing about fat cells is that's unlike really other cells, including muscle cells, we believe, is that the fat cell, when it fills up, let's say we have, 100 fat cells. They all fill up. But we're still eating junk, and we're not being as active. What do we do? Do you know what we do? It's got to go somewhere.
Does it create more fat cells?
It does. It's called hyperplasia, right? So the fat cell can get bigger. That'd be hypertrophy. It can get smaller because we lose fat out of that cell. That would be atrophy. Same as the muscle, same idea.
Right.
But our third term for today, I guess, is hyperplasia, this idea that we'll just create new ones. So the body's like, you fill these up? No biggie. I'll just make another one, and we'll put some more in. Hey, you keep coming in, no problem. I'll make another one. You bring in some more in, let's make some more. And it'll pack it in. It will store it where it has to.
Right.
And so we have sort of a generic total body way of storing fat. We have generally differences that we've touched on between men and women. For example, generally speaking, where women store fat tends to be different than where men. We discuss like the hips, that pear shape versus the apple shape, and the importance of the difference and the similarities of those. And so the body wants to do that. But when in the years in our research where women or men would lose weight and they would get compliments from people, let's say, or get a comment in a particular case, they'd say, oh, I noticed you've lost weight. And they're, well, how do you know? And it's like, well, it looks, I can tell in your face. Why is that? Because the body will store fat in the face if it needs to, but it's maybe more willing to get rid of that sooner than, let's say, for us men around our guts. Huh. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or women, maybe it's more so than
interesting.
than the buttocks and the hips and the thighs. And so We all are a bit different and individualized, but we all can probably notice when we gain, this is where we notice it first.
Right.
When we lose, this is where we notice it first. And so it sort of is a total body experience. And this is a good thing, too, which we'll probably talk about later, this idea of spot losing fat. In that when people lose fat cells, the fat in the cells out of their face, they're not doing face exercises. Right? They're doing something probably total body, expending enough energy to where they increase the demand for the fat cell to break down fat and give us energy. And so it is a total body experience, but we do kind of, I guess, visualize that experience as in segments from the face, from the arms, from the legs, from the belly, etc. But that's the big separation here, is that you have a muscle cell that's about contracting and moving the skeleton that can hypertrophy and atrophy. That's the apple in this analogy.
Okay.
And then you have the orange, which is the fat cell, which can hypertrophy, get bigger, pack in more fat. It's designed to do that. It can get rid of fat to provide the muscles with energy. That muscle, or that fat cell then gets smaller. That would be atrophy. But like we just talked, if we keep packing it in, we'll keep making more and more and more and more. There is an idea that once we lose the fat from a cell, that it just flattens out and it stays there. That's the other trick with this. So I've lost, but they're still sitting there. So if I now have 200 fat cells, and let's say I've gotten back to my first original 100, there's the thought that those 100 that I lost fat of are now just laying there flattened, but they're still there.
They're just waiting for you to
They're just
go
waiting
off the
for
wagon.
you to,
right?
exactly. And they're just waiting on that. There is indication that we don't have time to go into today, but there is indication. Remember we talked with the muscle cell when it atrophies, and we said, let's say I put on muscle, so my muscle cell gets bigger from working out, but I stop working out, my muscle gets smaller.
Right.
Well, we're not necessarily losing the cells, which we can, but in that analogy, or in that situation, we're losing the protein inside of that muscle cell. Well, it's a similar idea with the fat cell, that if we can convince our body that we don't need those fat cells, we can get rid of them. It's just really hard, and we don't know how long it takes, and again, another reason for prevention, to try not to ever get to that point. But we've seen too many people, even in our research, where they lose fat and it's off. And I can tell you the fat cells aren't there. There were some that would argue with that because, again, it's hard to test that. It's hard to know that for sure. But we have to assume that early on in the fat loss phase that those fat cells are still there, and to kind of be a little note of warning in the back of our brain that, hey, if I fall off the wagon, they might be readily. So watch how much I fall off the wagon. This is kind of one reason, to be honest, that early in the weight loss challenge, that I'm not a huge fan of cheat days.
Yeah.
Because of that risk. Plus, cheat days can turn into relapse. It's like I've been exercising, then I'm going to go off for a weekend, and then I don't jump back in on it on Monday, and then before I know it, it's months, years down the road. And diet can be very similar. Some can have the self-control to do that. They can venture off from a healthy diet for a day, and then next day, no problem, they're back on. We all have to sort of gauge at where we are in our process of pursuing health and fitness and wellness, what our self-control is, and how strong we are to handle those situations. But hopefully that clarifies this idea that we got an apple and an orange here, we got a muscle cell and a fat cell, and they're not converting to each other. I'd probably like to end with this idea that an apple and orange, we can eat both. In other words, we can pursue exercise and healthy eating to improve the muscle function, whether it be the size or the strength or the fitness or the endurance. But at the same time, we can also be pursuing to manage our body composition, and particularly the amount of body fat that we have. That we talked before, we want to get our body fat to a level that it's not adversely affecting our health.
Right.
And so this isn't about the body image side, which is a different topic as well. We're talking about health, and we can pursue both, just like we can both be eating an apple and an orange. We don't have to pick one or the other.
But again, it all comes back to, it's easier to develop that fat cell than it is the muscle, and it all comes back to exercise, making the right choices, and getting out there and doing it.
It does, and it's almost like when you do your exercise, the more specific your goal, the more specific the training. And so some will go, and I did, 3 sets. How come I didn't get humongous muscles? Well, you didn't train very specifically for that outcome. There is this idea of specificity and training in a way that gets the results that we want.
Yeah.
And so we can get with our exercise professional and find out what that is. Or not, or if not, we can get pretty frustrated. This idea of, I tried to work out and it didn't work. We have a tendency as humans to rationalize things that way. We globalize. So I've seen it all the time. Somebody will do a fad diet and it doesn't work. And they're like, I tried healthy eating. Healthy eating doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, no, you actually just tried that one diet.
Right.
But they globalize it to all healthy eating. Or I tried exercise and it didn't work. Or I tried exercise and it hurt my knee. Well, no, you did that type of exercise. It's not all exercise. And so we have to be careful. But I think hopefully it will be helpful to understand this idea of the way the fat is absorbed much more quickly. It's harder to lose. Muscle takes a specific effort to get hypertrophy, and there's probably some balance of those two with the time that you want to dedicate, with the effort that you want to put in, and being content with some standard that we have, whether it be health or body image or fitness, and the amount of effort and behavior and time that we want to put into those things. Okay, any other thoughts?
No, I think that was great. Once again, we appreciate your input, and hopefully our listeners learned something from this, and maybe it helps somebody change things for them the better.
I hope so. We'll keep pursuing all those positive health and wellness benefits. We appreciate you being here again, joining us on Health Hullabaloo here at Texas A&M Health Science Center.
Thank you for joining us on Texas A&M Health Talk, a production of the Texas A&M University Health Science Center. Visit us on the web at vitalrecord.tamhsc.edu, where you'll find answers to all of your health questions. Until next time, stay healthy.